The whole problem of suffering in the world is the mistake of the intellect, and that is given a technical name. The mistake of the intellect is called pragya parad. Pragya means a mistake. Pragya means intellect. Parad means mistake. And what's the mistake of the intellect? The intellect separates me from you and you from everything else. And why does the intellect do that? Because the intellect is a system of logic that is built on the interpretation of sensory experience. So in fact, as we have already said, sensory experience is not the crucial test of reality, and the intellect really is the worst enemy of man. It creates separation, it creates ideology, it creates dogma, it creates rigid patterns of thought. But feelings don't do that. Feelings are what you feel here, which tells you always a message from the universe. And there are only two messages that the universe gives. One is the feeling of comfort, the other is the feeling of discomfort. And if you can just follow your feeling of comfort, you will never do anything that is wrong. If you follow your feeling of comfort, it becomes impossible to hurt someone, also becomes impossible to be hurt by someone. Creative people are not terribly organized or disciplined. They function in chaos and confusion. Their discipline, their silence is their discipline. They have an inner stability that does not need to be rigidly attached to certain outcomes of expectation. They therefore function even in the midst of chaos and confusion. Creative people are childlike. They are not childish, but childlike. And again, you read in the scriptures, be as children, and only the children will enter the kingdom of God. Creative people are self-referral. I will come back to that point in a moment because it's the most important point. And lastly, creative people are not rigidly attached to any point of view. I should in fact say that they are not rigidly attached to the defense of any point of view. That is more important. 99.999% of the people in the world are spending 99.999% of their activity defending their point of view. And in fact, a war is nothing but the ultimate defense of a point of view. We have one going on in the Middle East right now. Everybody is strongly defending their point of view. Ayurveda says once you lose your rigid attachment to your point of view, or at least to the defense of your point of view, once you become totally and utterly defenseless, then you become invincible. Because there's nothing to attack. There's nothing to attack, then you have really acquired real power, which does not allow the birth of an enemy. Because what is the enemy going to attack? There's nothing there to attack. In fact, there was a beautiful expression I heard a few years ago from Mr. Gorbachev, who, as you learned, I'm sure a few days ago, he won the Nobel Prize in Peace. Mr. Gorbachev once said to Mr. Reagan, he said, we're going to do something terrible to you Americans. Mr. Reagan was quite offended, and he said, what? He said, we are going to deprive you of an enemy. And that is what he was meaning, the ultimate defenselessness that makes somebody invincible. So before we end this aspect of creativity, I just want to share once again the idea of self-referral, because according to Maharshi, and Maharshi Ayurveda, and the way Maharshi explains Ayurveda, that is the most important aspect of being, the aspect of self-referral. And before I discuss self-referral, I want to discuss object referral, which is the opposite of self-referral. A person who is object referral is a person who refers to objects to seek his identity. So if you meet somebody on the street, you ask him, who are you? What do? The universe. If they did, you'd probably say, this guy should see a psychiatrist. When in fact they are the universe. What do they say? They start referring to objects of reference. A name is an object of reference. A nationality, a street address, a bank account, the Mercedes you drive, etc. These are all objects of reference. They are the scenery, they are not the seer. So an object referral person is constantly referring to objects to seek his identity, and therefore evaluates and understands and tries to know himself through the eyes of others. The characteristic ingredient is conditioned response, or what we can call conditioned thinking. A person becomes a bundle of conditioned reflexes, constantly being triggered by people and circumstance, much as a Pavlovian model that salivates at the tinkle of a bell. It's exactly how 99.99% of human behavior is. You say, I love you, and he's happy. You say, you such and such, and you see the expression automatically. You realize how much control you have over people's emotions. You can say anything because they're totally bundles of conditioned reflexes. And so, in fact, there's a beautiful story that I will describe to you in 2 minutes about a great fable from India, which is a very beautiful story about object referral. There was this old man, and he had only 2 things in his life that he object referred to for his identity. One was a little pony that he had, and the other was his son. So those were his objects of reference in order to identify who he was. And one day the pony disappeared. And so he had lost half his fortune. He was devastated, and he was wallowing in the depths of his despair and crying and howling. And suddenly the pony returned. And with the pony was a beautiful, gorgeous white stallion, such as he had never seen before. A big Arabian horse. So suddenly, from the depths of despair, he was in the heights of ecstasy. And he was enjoying and celebrating his ecstasy and his good fortune, and his son was riding the beautiful white horse and fell down and broke his leg. And so from the heights of ecstasy, he was again plunged into the depths of depression. And the next day, the army was coming, and they were taking all the young children to the war, because they needed the young children to the war. They took all the young children, but they left his son behind because he had a broken leg. So from the depths of despair, he was in the heights of ecstasy. Now, you can see theoretically that the story doesn't have an ending. The story of object referral is without end. It is when one relinquishes one's power and one's energy to the object of reference. And according to Ayurveda, this is the mistake of the intellect. This is the mistake of the intellect which makes a person a victim of the environment instead of a creator of the environment. And Ayurveda says both happiness and unhappiness are aspects of object referral. So here is a very unique distinction that the Vedic psychologists make as compared to Western psychologists. They make a subtle distinction between what we call happiness and what we call bliss. Happiness, they say, is object referral. It's like this old man. The horse came back with a stallion, so he's happy. Or his son breaks his leg, he's sad. But now the son has broken his leg, another interpretation of the broken leg, he's happy again. So both happiness and unhappiness are as a cause of reference to objects and their interpretation. In other words, you need a reason to be happy, just like you need a reason to be unhappy.